reside down here in the Southwest Heights, and first time here, just wanted to see what it's about, what you guys discuss.
Sarah Rudy, and sort of like this gentleman. I'm sort of representing my Spruce Park Neighborhood Association.
Earl Higgs, member of the Albuquerque Police Department. This is my recruit. It's his last hours in the Southeast area. We're going up to the foothills. We're just here as members of the police department.
I'm Sean Delaney. I'll be in the south part of the foothills area command, so I'll still be kind of in the area.
I'm Alan Moore. I'm a community social worker, case manager. I work within the UNM school-based health centers, and I work predominantly at Highland and oversee our case management program at Gonzalo and Albuquerque High, as well as Vancouver and Washington.
I'm Bill Slauson. I'm the executive director for the Albuquerque Police Department.
Gabriel Cruz, I'm also with APD and my supervisor on division. I'm glad to be here. I get to other CPCs and I see the diversity here, so really interested. It's my first time at this one, so I'm just here. So,
Harry Williams, yes, the
Jeff Archuleta, Archie, who also Siesta Hills, and I'm also on the board as the last one.
I'm Judith here. I'm a volunteer with Casa de las Comunidades at the Worker House on Chalma, and an interested resident.
Pat Weaver, and I live over by Sagittarian Academy, and I just want to be more involved in the community. This is my first time. I'm Cheryl Christensen with the League of Women Voters. Paul Messner, this is my first one from the board also.
Good afternoon, my name is Mayor Chapel, and I'm also a new board member, and I just look forward to the continued positive change.
Can I use up all the extra time? I'm Mike Petrosky. This is my third month as a voting member. I was voted on in December, my third meeting. But I've been involved with this process for 2.5 years. This month marks 2.5 years since the announcement of the settlement with the DOJ. I volunteered for the Community Police Oversight Board, and thankfully it was not chosen. It's a demanding job. And what I found in this whole process, and having met some of our neighbors on these previous meetings, it takes a lot of time, and these meetings are too short, and I'm hoping to find a way with POD to create outreach, more visibility into the process. My number one goal is to earn your trust for being trustworthy, honest, open, transparent, all that sort of stuff. And my number two goal is to stop being one of the old upper middle class white men and encourage more diversity. That was one of the things that the fifth report mentioned, and diversity is a really difficult problem to address, so we need to find ways to reach out, and that'll be my third priority.
My name is John Boyd, and I'm a visitor, and I guess I'm, like you were saying, I'm a diverse person because I'm not native to this city, and I'm kind of looking at the city from the outside, not someone that's been here a long time and been through some of the problems with the community. But one of my main concerns were Wyoming in central area, Circle K, Madonna, business. Maybe since I've been there, that place is like a hot spot. I haven't seen it, but last year, a guy got ran over right there in the parking lot of Circle K. And it seems like every other week something's going on. But lately, they remodeled, they moved the bus stop, they cut the trees, they trimmed the trees, they moved the bus stop temporarily to the west, about 2 blocks, and that slowed down all the activity. And I have no idea what's going on. Some people say you can buy drugs, and some people say they sell alcohol, any type of alcohol, experimental alcohol, anything you want, you get, by that bus stop, by around the circle. But since they trimmed the trees and moved the bus stop, now they moved the bus stop back to the original location, but they didn't put the seats, and they trimmed the trees real low, so people don't have any place to sit down or to just go there and spend hours and hours on there every day. So that was my main concern. Since they all did that lately, the activities, some of the activities are quiet down quite a bit. But now the people, they go right in front of Albuquerque and they stand right there at the door, they panhandle, and I have no idea what else to do. If I got to stay over, it's not a safe place.
And we'll pick up on that in a little while as we get to the police report. Because Wyoming and Central has been a focus of the southeast area over the last several months. And we've known about some of the activities going on there. So we'll get back to that. Jeff, you want to?
Yeah, Todd Kirsting, golf coach down the street, Puerto del Sol. My sister has a business down the street, Native. And like our business cards say, we love to hear your stories when you come to our CPCs. And the more we hear diverse stories, we're going to continue to get diverse people. So continue to share your stories. I'm also the timekeeper, Todd, so if you do start talking later and you hear a little tone, it's just kind of we're just trying to get better at keeping the flow going. But then see me afterwards. And we're also trying to create, with Mike's office, great, other forums that where if we don't get to hear your stories, places that you can tell it, and even remain anonymous. And we're also experimenting at the Northeast Heights one, kind of like, we might go to Facebook Live, but a Zoom, which is video conferencing. And we might make some changes where people that can't make our meeting because of kids and whatnot can still maybe connect with us live during the meeting. So that's what me and Mike are trying to do, because we're trying to make this the progressive CPCs for other cities around the country to connect with people that might not be able to get to the meeting. So thank you very much for your time.
Hi, my name is Penny Escobar, and today I'm a first-time visitor, and I'm happy to be here.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tim Escobar. It's a pleasure to meet each of you. I'm assigned to the airport, which falls in the Southeast Command. So if you have any questions or any concerns when it comes to that part of the town, I'm here to help.
I'm Officer Jeff Bloodworth with the Albuquerque Police Department, Southeast Area Command. This specifically my beat, but I definitely focus a lot at Wyoming and Central. So if you want to get with me later, I can talk to you about it.
I'm Tom O'Connell. I'm honored to be a member of this esteemed council. It's my third meeting as a voting member.
Selena.
I'm back here. Can we give my spiel at the beginning of our presentation? I'll introduce myself at the
Yeah,
beginning.
okay, that'll work. And the cameraman.
Hi, folks. My name's Edward. I'm with Mirage Studio, working with AMI, and we videotape all the CPC events, and we put them up on YouTube, and they're available for those who can't make it, and that's why we're here. So happy to be here.
What is the channel that they're on?
You just type in the CPC City of Albuquerque, and it comes up automatically, the
YouTube address?
The YouTube address, right? So you don't have to know a specific URL to get there.
Yeah.
Just type in City of Albuquerque and all this comes up with the meta tags, and it's pretty easy to find. But we've been doing this myself. My name's Edward. Another cameraman, his name is Charlie, and he shoots for the Albuquerque Free Press. Another friend of mine, Mike Swick. So we cover the city every time CPC has a meeting. So they're up there. Just gotta find them.
Thank you all for coming and being here and joining us. We try to leave this as open as we can in the meeting. We do have an agenda. There are copies of the agenda on the table over here. If you didn't get a chance to pick one up, you go ahead and do that. Just for your knowledge, this CPC went through a hard time. Like Nicole said, that A few months ago, we were only at 4 members. Actually, in January, I was the only member. I refused to give up. And we've done a tremendous job of rebuilding. And I'm glad we're doing well. For information for the council members, I received an email from Riley Jordan. She is our young college student on our board, and because due to some personal things going on in her life, she's had to resign from the board. Hated to see her go. She was a tremendous member, and I think maybe it's still on the channel.
Ion, New Mexico, yeah.
Ion, New Mexico, channel 4, Ion, New Mexico. A couple of weeks ago, Sunday evening, she and one of the other CPC chairs were guests along with Nicole and
Officer Robin.
yeah. So, anyway, I hate to see her go. A couple of our members are unable to attend. One is traveling, and one is in a series of classes, and they'll be here next month. So, we're going to go ahead and get started. Would you like to tell us who you are?
Hi, I'm Dorothy Kerwin with Fair West Neighborhood Association.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So I'll call the meeting to order, and we do have a quorum of our membership. I have the agenda, and so I'm asking for approval of the agenda. Anything to be added or moved on the agenda? Any questions? So I move to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, approval of the February minutes. You should all have a copy of the minutes. I sent those out, and I think
They're in front of you.
they're on in front of the table. I have one correction to make to the minutes, and that is under item number 7. Erica Wilson didn't join the call center, the 911 call center in 2011. She joined as manager of the call center in 2008.
And she's the director.
And she's the director. So I'll make the correction and change that. With that correction, any other changes to be made to the minutes? One of the things that I'll come back to and refer to as we get further down in the agenda are some of the things that we discussed in last month's meeting. Some of those were items for presentations at our upcoming meetings, next meetings. I also have a thing to suggest to you that Riley actually talked about, and I think it would make a great recommendation to APD regarding the academy and what happens sometimes with some of the cadets. So we'll get into that later. Any other changes to the minutes? Motion to approve? So moved. Second? All in favor of approving the minutes of February, say aye. 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 Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so that's we do have to go through a certain formal set of things in the council. And so now, Selena, you're on.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here, especially if it's your first time. We hope that this process will engage you, that you'll get excited about it. We'll talk about the mission of the community policing councils, so that way you know where you are and how you can get involved and what the purpose of them is. My name is Selena Espinosa. I'm the Communication and Community Outreach Director for the Albuquerque Police Department. My background, I'm an Albuquerque native, graduated from El Dorado High School, went to school at Eastern in Portales, where I studied communication and an emphasis in broadcast journalism. I was an investigative reporter and a general assignments reporter, and And my job there in reporting is to look at things with an unbiased perspective and be able to report to the community what was going on. I saw that there was a need in policing to have that transparency and communication with the public, and that's exactly what I do for APD. So I've been with APD for 2 years. My job is to hopefully ask the questions that you would be asking, to be able to say, well, why is that going on? How does that training work? What does this look like? And then be able to give compact presentations to you so that you can understand what efforts APD is doing and what reform we're going through. I am here to answer your questions and to walk you through what is the agency's 5th report. I think it's important to note that this is an agency report, so it's APD reporting on what we believe our progress is, as opposed to a monitor's report, which the independent monitor and his team oversee our reforms and the data that we give them, and then they produce a report. So I just want to make it clear that this is APD's report. Recently, we've been getting a lot of questions, not only from the media, but the community, about where our settlement agreement would stand with the new administration on the national level, and what if DOJ just went away? What would happen to APD settlement agreement? The good news is that in Albuquerque, you have a settlement agreement. We don't have a consent decree. They're two very different things. An agreement means that we agreed to the terms, we crafted it, we wrote it. APD, the chiefs, literally sat down with the city attorneys and said, every line of that settlement agreement, they created. They embraced it and said, this is what we want to see for policing in Albuquerque. And then we took that to the Department of Justice, everybody agreed on those terms, and that's what's created our reform efforts. So even if there was no Department of Justice or no monitoring team in Albuquerque, these reforms are things that we would want to see, and things that we would expect you as a community, and especially the CPCs, to hold us accountable to. So that's why we want you to be well-versed in them and understand what's going on and what our expectations are, and hopefully hear what your expectations are too. So it's just a quote from Chief, if you care to read it, pretty much stating that. So this report covers the time frame of August through January. Where are we now? We've currently met all of the settlement agreement or court-approved settlement agreement, you'll hear it referred to as CASA, deadlines for policies and trainings. So the way it works is we wanted to have new policies and procedures in place. Those had to be approved by the independent monitor and Department of Justice. The second part of that is to train all of our officers and department to those new policies and procedures. The third step is it working? Which is the step we're in now. We call that the operational phase. Do those policies and procedures, that training, get the outcomes that we're looking for? There are 37 policies and procedures, and sometimes corresponding training that goes directly into the settlement agreement. You can find them all online right here under this link. And we were really focused this reporting period on the monitor's last concerns. And his last concerns were that there was a lack of the ability within the department to have proper supervision and to make sure that we were holding ourselves accountable on all levels. So not just on officer supervision, but data supervision, civilian supervision, to make sure that our processes in place were as rock solid as they could be. So that's really what we focused on during this period. We revamped some of our training when it came to use of force because the monitor had additional concerns that maybe the definitions weren't as clear as they could have been. All of the policies go through a 6-month review. So any policy that's with the settlement agreement is reviewed 6 months after its inception and then a year after that first inception of it. So it gets reviewed twice in this process because we know it's new and that there's dynamics changing and that that's an important process to go through. I think it's important for you to hear that when it came to uses of force in Albuquerque, we obviously knew how many times an officer had discharged their weapon, how many times we had a shooting, right? But we weren't critically tracking how many times an officer had pulled out their weapon and been able to de-escalate that situation, been able to get the outcome that didn't result in a shooting. It would be written into a report, it would be stated by the officers, it would be looked at by the supervisors, but there wasn't the tangible data and tangible systems in place to be able to, for me to the next day, if somebody asks, well, in February, what's that number? We wouldn't have been able to easily access it. So we wanted to make sure that we were tracking what we call a show of force. So an officer pulls out their gun and acquires a target, that is considered a show of force. So we wanted to be able to show when that happened and what the outcomes were. Were we able to talk a person into coming into custody peacefully? Do we have to use an alternative method? Was there some system that had happened from there? We're also tracking shows of force for electronic control weapons, or you know them as tasers, because that's one of the higher uses of levels of force within the department that the officers have in their tool belts. I've told you, and for people that are kind of new to this process, that we had totally revamped APD's training. All of the officers, when it came to use of force, underwent new use of force training. And it was the first time that we had done it in a different way. We wanted to make sure that it was hands-on, reality-based, and focused on critical thinking. So one of the media outlets that has been very critical of APD and its reform process has been KRQE. We invited them to come in and sit through a whole week as if the reporter was an officer, that training, and report on it from their perspective. So I'm going to show you what their report is, and I think there's value to seeing how somebody outside of the department looked at it as opposed to me just telling you what it looks like. I want you to pay attention to the people in the yellow vest. Those are our trainers. And then all of the interactions are officers, and then you'll see when there are actors put into those scenarios to help spur the questions and work on training further.
Huge undertaking, teaching police officers not to shoot before they absolutely have to, teaching them how to make an arrest without resorting to unnecessary violence, and most importantly, getting everyone to buy into it. Tonight on Special Assignment, News 13's Chris McKee gives you a first-hand look inside APD's new use of force training. For Albuquerque Police, it goes a long way. I don't care anymore. It's lifelike situations. Giving officers a chance to reset.
I think that definitely people are going to see that, we're doing everything we can.
And we want to help you out, dude.
Teaching only that force is reasonable and necessary at the time when those incidents happen.
Through classroom teaching, that can still be a show of force. And hands-on, real role playing.
It's important that we get this taken care of.
APD is now in the process of retraining every single officer in how and when to use force. It's a key component of everyday work that the department has agreed to change nearly 2 years after the feds put their foot down.
The Albuquerque Police Department engages in a common practice of violating residents' Fourth Amendment rights by using excessive force during police encounters.
A finding that came after years of public scrutiny and protests through the streets of Albuquerque for the department's history of controversial shootings, violent arrests, and expensive lawsuits.
There's always those things that we could have done a little bit better forward.
Rick Afraidy says he hears the criticism and wants officers to get better. He's one of the officers who's created some of the new training material.
My entire chain of command through training has wholeheartedly agreed that we're not going to do a check the box, but we have to be training, we're going to be quality training that the officers are going to get a lot out of.
APD has completely rewritten its use of force policy. Instructors say what it means is a new emphasis on how officers should operate.
We're just trying to make our tactics better so that we're safer as officers, and then we're less likely to have to use force.
So how does it all play out? Since February, every single APD officer has taken a week or 40 hours off of the job to learn. New use of force training starts in the classroom with 3 full days of instruction. You'd rather have what? More distance. Trainers are re-emphasizing that officers should keep their distance and use the minimum amount of force necessary. I take a step or two back. What do they need to do? They need to now start over and observe what I'm doing. They want officers to take more time to talk to people and think harder about if they should use any level of force. APD is also teaching officers to use tasers less. We can no longer using drive stun mode alone. That drive stun mode is when an electric current is jabbed directly into a person, causing intense pain. Officers are now required to fire the taser's darts first to try to incapacitate the suspect. The taser is now also considered one of the highest uses of force. Officers are being taught to go hands-on with uncooperative suspects more often. 2 days of the new training tests officers in realistic scenarios. The officer here is practicing the arrest of a resisting person for a misdemeanor.
He said, "Don't pull away from me." He pulled away from me again and started trying to flee.
Instructors are there too to critique the officer's reasoning behind their action. It's feedback many officers say they haven't gotten since their police academy days.
He covered the 3 things: a severity crime, a immediate threat, and if he's actively fleeing with violence.
Because APD is teaching officers to go hands-on more often.
Harder for him because he's in a high guard.
They're also retraining officers on how to defend themselves when the suspect tries to get the upper hand.
It's a safe location to make mistakes. We can correct mistakes.
And when it comes to deadly force, officers are still using interactive video to train.
Sir, stop! Drop the gun! Drop the gun!
But perhaps one of the most critical new training scenarios is this.
Just want to tell him the story. I will, man. Mike, if I get you to take a step back, I'll let you know. Buzz.
The man is an actor, armed with a fake knife, pretending he wants to hurt himself or anyone else. APD is training Officer Ramiro Garza how to talk the man down. Instructors pause the action to make corrections.
We may be getting sucked into this conversation, but the problem here may be that your partner may be forced to use force if he keeps getting closer. I need you to recognize the danger because of the proximity and let him know that he needs to back up.
We've got good so far, man, but I need you to step back.
Officer Garza has been with APD for 7 years.
It's very challenging. We've had training in the past, but nothing I think as far as this caliber. It's a little more intense, which I think is good.
Some civil rights groups, like the ACLU, feel encouraged by the new training.
Absolutely. Those are the 2 things that I think we're most looking for. Would be the increased use of reality-based scenarios so that officers get conditioned to the kinds of reflexes they should have in certain circumstances. And then also an emphasis on de-escalation.
But Simonson says, ultimately, if APD is going to change, officers have to buy into the new ideas and be held accountable if they don't. Garza admits it's hard to have the feds come in and say, you need to do your job differently.
It is what it is right now.
But he believes what officers are learning now is being taken to heart.
Most people here, I believe that they want to help. They want to help, the citizens. They want to give back to the community. That's one thing I do pride myself on is doing the best that we can and I can.
On special assignment, Chris McKee, KRQE News 13.
APD should hire a force set to finish the new use of force training by the end of the month.
So you get to kind of see what it looked like from that reporter's perspective. I hope that you see that, a simple thing like the officer was really talking with his gun while he was talking to the suspect or the subject that he was interacting with, and you saw the trainer just reach over and say, here, instead of like right here, here. And those little adjustments that you can do in those scenarios to be able to say, you're not doing anything wrong, but this is a little bit better. So little steps that we can take to make it even more effective, and the communication between the officers and the individuals more effective. So we can talk about questions or anything to keep them in the brain. When it came to reviewing uses of force and supervisors making sure that they were reviewing them properly and that we were catching what needed to be caught, we've implemented a lot of new technology to make sure that it's standard across the board, that Sergeant A does it the same as Sergeant B, and Area Command in the Southeast is doing it the same as the Area Command in the foothills. Now that seems like a no-duh, but it's difficult when you're reporting what you did at a scene. You're telling somebody and the officer's investigating what just occurred. So it has to have that standard ability to make sure that we were helping it be uniform. One of those technologies that we've implemented is called Blue Team. Think of it as a bucket. Anything that involves a use of force investigation now goes into this bucket, and anybody in that chain of command has access to the bucket. So they can look and see, is the video there? Is that report there? Is your supplemental report there? Is this witness testimony in there? So that way, we know that the bucket is complete, and if the bucket isn't complete, an additional concern memo is generated to the officer. They're putting it in writing of what was missing, It gives them a chance to say why it was missing or what deficiency there was and address that deficiency, and then that goes through the chain. So that way there's a standard process to document that supervision and how it's getting done. They've also created employee work evaluations for the officers and civilians within our department. In the private sector, you have your career goals, right? You sit down with your manager and you say, well, I love my position, I want to stay right where I am, but here's my goals for my position. We're going to have officers that don't want to be sergeants, that want to be officers. Officer Simon Robick that you see on the news repeatedly, he loves being a beat cop. He wants to be a beat cop, and he doesn't ever want to be a sergeant. So his 20-year career is going to be as a beat cop. But we don't want that individual or individuals that's what they're passionate about and they want to do, to just stay stagnant. Have goals and make sure that you're reaching those goals. It also gives us the ability to address any deficiencies at that time too. We've implemented some standard job duties when it comes to use of force investigations. We talked about that. And then even inspection forms, so that everything from the officer's cleanliness of their car, to how their uniform and their appearance is, to the date on their taser cartridges, which can expire, is being checked and reviewed by your supervisors. When it comes to reviewing use of force, you're not only doing it through the chain of command, but we've created a force review board. And this force review board is comprised of the director of the Civilian Police Oversight Agency, so that you get somebody independent in there, the academy major who looks over training, so that we're looking for opportunities for training to be approved or any deficiencies, and then subject matter experts in that field. So if it's an auto theft case where there was a use of force, we bring in the auto theft supervisor. If it's a canine bite where the dog bit a suspect, we bring in the canine unit. So that way they are familiar with their operating procedures and how those investigations are supposed to go per the standard operating procedure. That board reviews every serious use of force. So what's a serious use of force? It's a tasing more than 3 cycles, so is serious use of force, or more than 15 seconds where that electric current lasts more than 15 seconds. Obviously shootings are serious uses of force, and a beanbag. And anything that requires hospitalization for whomever we're interacting with. So whether that's a laceration, a broken bone, a bump on the head, anything that requires hospitalization of the person we're interacting with is considered a serious use of force. They also sampling, just randomly review the non-serious uses of force. Not that every use of force isn't serious, but we have them in 2 categories. And then they're reviewing our SWAT situations. So call-outs, the outcomes of those situations, and the deployments, the way that that situation unfolded, to make sure that they're all meeting our standard operating procedures, looking for training and new techniques that could be implemented, and just how everything went. You have an additional level of oversight because the Civilian Police Oversight and the Police Oversight Board, they also review all of our serious uses of force. So that's an independent agency that is looking at them as well. We've added additional training this reporting period. The first big one was supervisor training, and not only were officer supervisors, so sergeants and above, lieutenants, commanders, went through this training, but all of our civilian managers as well. And it was in accordance to the 6 Sigma process. And in the corporate world, they use this 6 Sigma process to define and figure out deficiencies. You take a process, you run it through the system to figure out, are you getting the most bang for your buck, essentially? Is the process as efficient as it could be? Is the consumer or the customer in this policing field, we have stakeholders, you the community, getting the most efficient use of the police resource? And just making sure that we do that with every process. We're not only doing it with what the officers do in the field, but also data collection. The 911 center, looking at how dispatchers are answering calls, looking at how I myself am operating with the media and making sure that all of those things are efficient. And even at the area command levels of their admin staff, are they being used to the best of their abilities and the resources that they're provided? Are you getting the most benefit from the people that are in place at APD? We trained our officers on misconduct complaint intake forms. Every police officer has, if you'd like to file a complaint against an officer or give them a commendation and a kudos, they have a form inside their vehicles, and that goes straight to the Civilian Police Oversight Agency, as opposed to APD investigating those or taking those, and how that process should work. So just making sure that that's standard across the board for every single officer or supervisor within a department. And then our field training officer program, which we have somebody within our field training officer program here with us, has been updated a little bit too. It's 16 weeks. I just learned that it's in 4 different officers. So that's a need to be corrected in my PowerPoint. And in 4 different area commands. Well, right? 4 different area commands. So that the officer is getting to know different sergeants or officers within the department. They're getting to know different parts of the city, and they're being monitored for all these things. They're looking if they can manage themselves. Is that officer able to work independently? Are they on task? Are they doing their reports accurately? Do they follow the mediums of constitutional and community-oriented policing? How do they interact when they do traffic stops? How do they interact when they go to a burglary call? And then effective problem-solving techniques. Somebody comes up to them on the streets, how do they handle that? There's a breaking scene and they have to go to 2 calls at once, or they're getting called in different ways. How do they respond to that? They're graded on all the core values, which for APD are integrity, respect, fairness, and pride. We also did something really unique this training period for cultural sensitivity and diversity. We know that other settlements agreements across the nation have found proof of bias-based policing. That's not something that our settlement agreement found here in Albuquerque, and we specifically asked the Department of Justice to look for it. But we are such a diverse community that we need to make sure that we don't have a problem. Let's just do it before there is any evidence of a problem. Let's be proactive about this. So what we did was we reached out to an outside stakeholder to create a panel for the officers in the cadet class to do some training. And it was comprised of members of the Hispanic community, members of the African American community, the Native American community, and the Asian community. And they all gave their own perspectives on the history of policing. The history of policing for the African American community is very different than the history of policing for the Native American community. There might be several things that overlap, but the ethnicities comparison and viewpoint on policing was different. So they're able to tell their own stories. They're also able to break down some of those cultural barriers that might exist within just who we are in essence. A good example of that I can give you is the Asian presenter was saying in the Asian culture, they're very detailed about everything. That when they tell a story, that story is not going to go A, B, C. It's going to go A, and here's why A happened, B, and here's why B happened, C, and here's why C happened. And that's not them trying to be evasive or elusive in any way. It's just a culturalism. It's the way that they communicate in generalities, right? These are all generalities. So just listening to that and understanding the different perspectives that might be represented in our community. We're also looking to diversify and improve upon that training to include the transgender community, to include different religions, because there are different perspectives and dynamics when it comes to religions as well. And then a new group that has approached us is the hard of hearing community, or a deaf community. Nicole and I just sat in a round table with a few members of their coalition, and just speaking through an interpreter can be very hard. And so in a crisis scenario, for an officer and that individual to interact, when seconds matter, it could cause a problem. And we just want to make sure that officers are familiar with the things that would be hard for individuals with hearing impairments, and that those with hearing impairments would be able to understand what the officer is probably going to immediately need. We're creating some visual aids that the officers will carry that will have like some simple things that we can use to wait for an interpreter to get to the scene, and just looking at different ways we can improve that overall perspective. We really focused on mental health, and we're always focused on mental health training here in Albuquerque because that's one of the big things within our settlement agreement is use of force, and then dealing with people who are in crisis, especially those that have mental health diagnoses or might not have diagnoses and are just having a crisis. The state requires 40 hours of mental health training for all officers in the state of New Mexico. We go a step further and the officers, after they get off of their field training program, go back to the academy and get an additional 40 hours in crisis intervention training. So that gives them more tools in their tool belts, essentially, whether that be verbal tools or ability to diagnose and look at things as they're happening that point to a person who might be in mental health crisis. And that's hands-on, reality-based training as well. They're dealing with actors and scenarios, again, much like the use of force training. We created a crisis intervention unit, which is officers that specialize in those crisis type. They're not necessarily investigations, but we'll have repeated people that we see over and over again that need help from the police. And we found that that unit is able to work with those individuals, help them with the resources, build that familiarity, it's been a long day, familiarity with them, and then be able to help that situation come to the outcome it needs to. And we'll look at some of what the results of those outcomes are. They work directly with this crisis outreach and support teams, which you've heard us talk about, the COAST teams. COAST teams are comprised of civilians. So it's social workers and behavioral health specialists, and an officer care. So these two units work together. We've created new mobile crisis teams, which essentially, it's a different pronged approach. They are looking at partnerships with state police, Valencia County, the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office, and then our partners at AFD. And we send a paramedic and a firefighter, or a firefighter, and a police officer to calls for individuals that you see somebody sleeping on the side of the freeway in the median, you don't know if they are breathing or not. That would be a call that this mobile crisis team would go to. So that way they are taking that burden off of the field officers, but you have the right resources sent to that call right away, as opposed to a field officer who might not have the right tools to be able to help the individual who needs them at that time. We're also working on enhanced crisis intervention. Our goal is to have 40% of the department certified what we call ECIT, an enhanced crisis intervention. And it's additional 8 hours of training. And those officers that are really good at that crisis intervention training and that we watch go through it, we identify them for this ECIT team. They would be the first responders, so if available, and there's a call out in the field, like right now, there was a call out and we could tell that either it was somebody we were familiar with that has had mental health crises or just crises in general, or like a suicide call or barricaded subject call, somebody who's considering jumping off the bridge, all of those types of things, those ECIT officers would be the first responders before maybe the COAST unit or the other units could get there. So it'd be field officers that would be quickly dispatched to those crisis intervention type calls. We have also created the Mental Health Response Advisory Committee, or MRAC, and you can think of MRAC as the other portion of our civilian oversight. So CPOA, or sort of this Civilian Oversight Police Agency, I had a really long day. Civilian Police Oversight Agency looks over all the serious uses of force. MRAP looks over every call that deals with an individual in mental health crisis. So it's the other extension of that independent overview, but this one focusing on individuals with mental health, or our calls and interactions with individuals with mental health concerns. It's comprised of members of all walks of life, providers, our officers, the court system, because a lot of these individuals can be charged over and over, but maybe that's not the best route for them. And then family members and consumers. We talked about what they do. For officers, when it comes to mental health, we hired a clinician who's a former police officer to help with some of the counseling. And they can counsel officers one-on-one. You can bring your family in and get counseling as a family. It's all, private, is that the right word? It's all confidential, that's the word. It's all confidential. So making sure that our officers have the resources when they're struggling with things as well. And then we hired us a peer support coordinator just recently, and they're going to create mentoring teams. So if there's a big incident, the Victoria Martin's case, for instance, where it was affecting the officers just having to witness those types of cases, these peer support groups would go in and be able to help the officers, counsel them, and they would have somebody to talk to that's not necessarily a psychologist, but would be able to help from that perspective work through that situation. Here's some of the outcomes when it comes to mental health. So from January through October, the field, so our field officers responded to 2,064 crisis intervention related calls. Of those 2,000 calls, 1,606 calls resulted in hospitalization or what we would call jail deferrals. So there wasn't charges, they weren't jailed, they were taken to the hospital to get the resources that they needed. That's that red portion of this pie. 189 of those resulted in no transport, which is the brown piece here. That means we were able to resolve it on the scene. The officers got there, they were able to work with the family member, work with whomever was in crisis, and make sure that they got the resource that they needed, or just calm that situation down to where it was no longer an issue. 175 of those reports are still in process. That's this green piece of the pie. And that means they're probably working with our COAST units or our CIT units. So no charges, just resources and making sure that they have the ability to reach out when they need us and we're there for them when they call. 57 of those, this little slice, were suicide related, which aren't charges. If you threaten to commit suicide, that's not a crime. And we're just, again, hooking them up with the right resources. 34 of them, or 1.65%, did result in arrest or detention. And then the other little piece of this pie was other services. Maybe we got them to heading home or somewhere different where they were referred out. When it comes to those 2,000 calls, of that whole 2,000 calls, only 6 of them resulted in some type of force having to be used. When we say force, that doesn't mean that they were tasered or shot. Use of force is classified as if I go to arrest you as an officer, I'm obviously going to put my hands on you and handcuff you. If you pull away at any point and I have to just simply kind of bring you back or put your hand back, that's where force starts. So that's the most basic level of force, is any resistance on the individual's part. So if they pull away at all, that's where force starts. So of those 2,000 calls, only 6 of them resulted in some type of force. We created the Office of Policy Analysis so that you can have an input in our policies. We've really leaned on the CPCs and they're now reviewing our use of force policy to give us that guidance and that feedback. APD is one of the only departments in the nation where we ask the community to weigh in on our policies and procedures. Review our use of force policy, look at our taser policy. Does this make sense? Do you understand this? Do you have questions? And of those, so if there's a recommendation or you have a question, those go specifically to the Office of Policy Analysis. They are the ones that are also responsible for helping with our 6-month reviews of our policies. Now, since OPA's creation, which has been about a year, we've received 45 recommendations that were from community stakeholders, whether that's individuals or groups like the ACLU or APD Forward. Of those 45 recommendations, about half, 47%, have been accepted. So we're listening and we're taking those ideas and actually putting them into policy. OPA is also, just in case you're not familiar, responsible with collecting information on lawsuits across the nation, looking at trends when it comes to policies, looking for best practices. Maybe this department just underwent this incident and we can learn something from it. How did they change their policy? And let's see if that's in our policy. So they do that general over-review. Sometimes people are like, well, don't you look at best practices? I'm like, yes, we do. It's OPA that does it. And then they're able to incorporate that into our current policies. We always get lots of questions about staffing, so we'll talk about staffing. Let me get my numbers in front of me. So we've increased our graduation rate by more than 400% from 2010 to current. Last year, we graduated, the city of Albuquerque graduated the most recruits in more than a decade. We had 93 people graduate the Albuquerque Police Academy last year. We also created a staffing plan, which was published in June. I was going to give you the actual recruiting numbers so that you can see that percentage. Oh, right there. So just so you can see where that 400% comes from, 2013 we graduated 17 people from the academy. 14 it was 53, 15 it was 33, and 2016 it's 93. So we we've changed the way that we're reaching out to people. It's based mostly online. We've changed the types of ads, the verbiage of our ads. Sergeant Dossel actually posed for one of the pictures in our ads to show just real people in our department and what we want to see come to Albuquerque. So she's a banner for what we'd like to see come to Albuquerque, because she's in the fine arts. Just so you know, more than 1,000 people apply for that academy, and we usually see about 30 people out of that 1,000 candidates that come in. So we're not changing our standards any. We still have the standards completely the same since 2010. We're just doing a better job of broadening that pool and making sure that we're seeing the right people. Our current numbers in the field, we have 844 total sworn people at APD. That does not include the airport, because airport is new and that doesn't include into our allotted staffing number. Our allotted number, so the number that we're funded for is 1,000 police officers. Of those 844 officers, 488 of them are assigned to your Field Services Bureau. Now that does include your lieutenants and your sergeants. So that's not just your officers that are patrolling, that's your commanders as well. And then right now we have 37 police service aides. This is kind of a new concept. We broadened that and have created more PSA positions. We could go up to 60 PSAs if we got the proper candidates. And we've created those to be part-time positions, so that we're allowing that to almost be an entry-level police officer position. And students that are taking criminal justice courses at UNM but don't want to lose their lottery scholarship could still go to school full-time but come work for APD part-time, figure out if that's the career path for them, and then hopefully move on to becoming an officer. So we're making that career path much more fluid and a little bit easier. We've revamped our promotional process. I'm going to let you read that right from the process so that you can get knowledge of what we're looking for when it comes to promoting people. The CASA dictates that our supervision level should be 8 officers to 1 sergeant. We would like to see it decrease to 6 officers to 1 sergeant. That right now isn't able, because we don't have the staffing to do that. But that way, and maybe the sergeant can attest to this, they'd be doing a little less paperwork, and they'd be interacting with the officers more one-on-one. They'd be able to be out in the field with them, and hopefully that helps a little bit more with the supervision and just the quality. I bet Sergeant Dossel feels like she runs around like a chicken with her head chopped off. So if you had less people to supervise, that would probably help her out a lot. So we're at the standard of 8 to 1. We'd like to see it down to 6 to 1. Chief yesterday said, I'd even like to see it down 4 to 1. But that's perfect world. Let's talk a little bit about community policing councils for new people here, which is where you are. They were created by the mayor prior to the CASA. They were written into the CASA because APD sees it as the way of community input and community oversight. If the CASA was to go away, it's the CPCs who are going to hold the department accountable to it being the department that you want. They're independent completely of the city and the department. We're just here as a resource when asked, and the officers are here to give you their honest opinions. We know Officer A's opinion is going to be different than Officer B's opinion. And she has said, we want you to speak from your perspective, your heart, and be honest. So if you completely hate the policy and procedure that was put into place by Chief Eden, say why, and let's talk about it, because there's the caveat for change right here at the CPCs. They create recommendations that are then sent directly to the chief. The most tangible one of those that I can give you to point to is in the foothills. They were concerned that they would see officers in their neighborhoods, and maybe the officer was parked at a neighbor's house and sat there for 30 minutes because we know that the officer's doing their report and figuring all out their follow-up. But that resident was concerned, I can't see that officer, I'm not real sure what they're doing. We brought in subject matter experts to say why window tint, because that was the concern, on cars might have to be above just regular stock standard window tint. The officer spends 8, now 12 hours in a car in that long sleeve uniform with a Kevlar vest on and 80-degree heat. They don't have a desk, that car is their desk. With SWAT officers, they carry a lot of gear in that car, and it's a liability and a safety concern for all of that gear to be exposed. And then in canine units, there's a dog in that car. And that car is that dog's home for that shift. And they're air conditioned and all of those things, but there's a need for there to be a little bit darker tint on a police officer's window than simply the regular stock tint. But the concern was that some of that tint might be above city code. Well, that makes sense. We don't want to be breaking a city ordinance or breaking a code or breaking a law that's there. So the sergeants were tasked with taking that tint meter, just like we would on any city vehicle, any of the community's vehicles, and measuring that tint. We found 16 cars that were above the city ordinance. So that means 16 officers, or the officer before them that had that car, had upgraded the tint on their window to where it wasn't city legal. So that needed to be fixed. Community concern created a recommendation. We came to a compromise, education on why it would need to be a little bit darker than just clear windows, but yet we don't want to be breaking the ordinance either. And that's something that I think, things like that that are generated from the community come to these councils, and that's the change that we create. Just some things that you can go to for the councils. Nicole has helped really increase the website presence, so if you have a question, there's even a question and answer field. Todd, you're kind of talking about ways to be anonymous, or I don't know that, it would give us your email address, but you wouldn't have to give us your name, and you could leave a question or comment on that field. We hired Nicole Chavez-Lucero, who is our community outreach coordinator, and she works directly with the councils to increase communication. We publicize them in these different ways. A lot of these were helpful by Todd. He created the banner that you see on the wall over here, and he created some business cards, which has been really helpful. We formalized the recommendation process to make sure it's smooth and more efficient, and we're finalizing, all of the councils have their guidelines, and they created them. So it wasn't APD saying, this is what you'll do, this is where we want you to focus. The councils themselves organically created those guidelines. We're looking at a lot of different ways of community engagement because we know you want to get to know your officers. Obviously, this is one way to get to know them. We try to give you news you can use through social media. We know that the good stuff doesn't always get picked up by the big agencies, and that there might be situations that you won't always hear about, but it happened in my neighborhood and I still want to know about it, but it's not the breaking news on Channel 7. So where do you go, or 13 or 4? We won't be biased here, right? You can go to our social media and figure that out. There's some analytics here. If you don't have social media, we make that available on the city's website. There's lots of people that don't want to be on Facebook or Twitter. You can go to cabq.gov and see all of those as well without having to have an account. We reach about 1 million people directly each month through those platforms. So we put the CPCs out there on those platforms so that more people can know. We'll put this presentation out there on those platforms so that we can tell the community what we're doing. Or a single mom that doesn't have time to come to a meeting will be able to watch it later. We'll still continue Coffee with a Cop, which is simply just that. Sit down with your officers, get to know them, have a cup of coffee, and let's talk about what you're concerned about, or just ask questions. If you want to have a coffee with a cop, neighborhood watch, maybe a few group of your neighbors, maybe just 5 people. Me and Nicole would be the contacts, and we'd love to facilitate that. We're creating a community calendar, and the officers actually now have a 10 code for community meetings. So anytime an officer dispatches wherever they're going to a SWAT situation, they're dispatched at a 76, right? 76 call out, which is a SWAT situation. Now a 75-1 is a community meeting, and we're doing a better job of tracking what community outreach looks like as a department. I can tell you that our officers are doing it, that they're interacting, that they're going these places, but I wasn't able to break down, well, what does community outreach look like in the Southeast? Are they going to more schools? Are they going to more neighborhood associations? Are they going to more businesses and talking to businesses? What are they doing, and how can we measure that? We're also developing a mobile app for your smartphones. You'll be able to get breaking traffic alerts, news, CPC information, file a report straight from your smartphone. So that's something that goes off. If an officer drops their gun and it goes off, which we never do. But if that was to happen, that counts as a firearm discharge. Those have gone down 72%. So 2010, we had 25, 14, 11, 2015, 10, 2016, 7. One of those was at a dog. The dog came charging at the officer. It was a huge boxer. Not that that makes it any less impactful, but I think it's important to just decipher what that call was. We're creating a new property crime specialist, and this person is, so in the corporate or the private sector, you have a stepping stone to becoming that doctor, right? You don't just go straight to being a doctor. So the first step at APD is a police service aide. The second step is now this property crime specialist. And what they are going to do is they'll be able to respond to our burglary calls, whether that be an auto burglary or a home burglary, where there's not any immediate threat or immediate suspect information. They'll be able to do the forensics of that scene, gather any fingerprints, DNA that might be left behind, and then take that report. The goal is that it cuts down on that wait time, because right now, those calls are holding for about 2 hours, maybe more than 2 hours. And so if you get up, you see that your car has been broken into, and you need to get to work or school or whatever it is, you have the availability to wait for 2 hours? Probably not. So that person will go take that report and then hopefully be able to turn that report within 72 hours and get that report directly back to you and have that direct communication of what the follow-up is. So did you find anything? Did that fingerprint come back to anybody? Was it passed on to a detective? Tell me how that went. So that's taking a little bit of the burden from some of these calls off of our field officers and then giving you better customer service as well. It pays, we're hiring currently, they're currently doing interviews, and it pays $17 an hour. We're kind of looking for somebody that's maybe a little bit more mature than just an 18-year-old who would go into a police service aide position. Not that there aren't lots of amazing PSAs, because there really, really are. But maybe somebody who just retired and is looking for a new career but doesn't want to wear a badge and go through all of the intense training that these officers do. So kind of that second tier, and then maybe we convince them that they really like it and they go all the way to becoming an officer. What's next? So the next monitor's report will be released on May 2nd, and it'll cover the same period that we're talking about now, this August to January. You can read any of these reports and all of the monitor's reports, our settlement agreement, and any documents related to the settlement agreement on this link on the website. Go to cabq.gov/police. The left-hand side is the very first tab that you'll see. And Community Policing Councils is the very last one, so that makes it easy to access. And with that, I stand for lots and any and all questions.
Will the CPOA still continue after the work of the DOJ is over, like our CPC? Both of them will?
Yeah, so people don't always know that CPOA existed before the settlement agreement too.
Oh.
It was a different structure, but it was there.
Oh.
It's much more fruitful now, I think, and they're running more efficiently because of the settlement agreement and some of the reforms that we put into it. But if that went away, I don't see them reversing on that progress. CPOA has always existed, and why take it back to the Stone Age, right? We keep up, keep improving here. And that's also something that, if settlement agreement went away, we'd ask the CPCs, that's something that you really like in a community, you see it slide in a direction that you don't want it to, that you hold them accountable as well.
That was very informative, and thank you very much. My question comes out of my experience as a person living in a neighborhood. We do not have violent crime, i.e. shootings, people being murdered, rapes, the horror. We have property crime, cars being stolen, houses being broken into. Now, I understand when you say that we have 800 policemen, that's actually not enough for the violence that happens in our city, unfortunately. But neighborhoods need some sort of police presence. I was told, and this is anecdotal, but I was told that, for instance, in the international area, they put some people, police people on bicycles that actually came to their community meetings, and that people literally knew them by name and would have coffee with them. I don't know a single policeman's name in this city. So, this has a couple of tangents to it. One is, why don't we have more policemen? Is that a city problem with money? And if that is, what can we do as citizens to pressure our city council to get more money to have this type of police work? And secondly, why don't we have in neighborhoods without the violent police presence?
Yeah, so one of the things, I'll address the second question and then we'll go to the first question. One of the things that we've implemented is police and community together teams, which are police and community together teams, or our PACT teams. They are just beginning, so we have 3 lieutenants, and I think they all now have sergeants, I think. And eventually there'll be a squad of the ratio 8-to-1, 6-to-1, and there'll be a team that specifically focuses on that proactive policing, that community policing, going to those business meetings, going to those neighborhood association meetings. And right now the way it's structured is officers bid for their shifts every year. Some officers choose to stay on that shift and in their area of command, but because the officers that choose the PAC teams are choosing it, they would choose to stay in that area of command for 3 solid years. So that you would get to know them, you would have their cell phone number, you'd be able to call them and work with them directly. So that's one facet, right? The other things that we're looking at are those crime prevention specialists that we were talking about.
Yes.
So that way, that will free our officers up a little bit to do more proactive patrols and not just be going property crime to property crime to property crime. It should also help with the investigative arm of those property crimes and hopefully make those investigations a little bit more fruitful because our officers are just so slammed. So they take that report, they do what they can as far as follow-up, and then it either gets passed on to a detective or it doesn't. And so they try in their time to do follow-up between calls, but it's really
I understand that part, which was the part of my second question.
Yeah.
And
So-
also, that without giving numbers, I would also be curious to know how our police officers are paid, with their pay on a high enough grade as competitive with other places.
So starting pay is competitive. When it comes to scale pay, and I was even kind of thrown to know this, there's no grade scale for an officer. So an officer who doesn't promote to a bigger assignment, to sergeant or lieutenant, their pay doesn't really have a sliding scale. It gets political, and we try to avoid that conversation, but the union has made many statements about what they think officer pay should be and where the scale should kind of go. We're trying to look at it, there's not money everywhere, right? So we have to be a good steward of your tax dollars, and what situations can we wrap around besides just asking for money at the problem to be able to help increase what officers are doing and that ability.
I've always thought that teachers and police people should be the most highly paid people in society, but it doesn't work that way, of course. Are our police people paid competitively to say like Phoenix or Denver or?
So starting pay, yes, and for that first phase of their career, yes. As you get 10, 15, 20 years into their career, we'll see officers that go to Denver, because I think they pay $34 an hour. We right now pay 27, I believe.
And,
I'm gonna let you all know, our retirement in this state is better than any state around us. Everybody that puts in 25 years here gets 80%. In Phoenix, in Colorado, in Texas, they're doing 30 years to get 60%. So New Mexico is taking care of its law enforcement officers at least once they get to their 25 or 30 years.
well, that's good to know. And then the other part was, who do we pressure if we want more, if we want to get involved in this?
That's a city council decision, so it's up to your city councilors.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tom had a question, he raised his hand already, so Tom first.
So, when I went through the Citizen Police Academy, we had plenty of use of force training, but we didn't have any civil rights training or training in the laws that cops are paid to enforce. I think we've all seen the stories, countless stories, YouTube videos of police around the country falsely charging people with so-called contempt of cop crimes, like resisting arrest, when somebody's not really resisting arrest, but they do it because they say you don't like the attitude of the person or something, and then those charges are always immediately thrown out by the prosecutor. We've all seen that, those stories. And there's no consequences for the cops that do that. And I wonder why there's no training. Am I allowed to arrest somebody for filming me making an arrest, for example? No, that's a First Amendment thing. You're not allowed to arrest somebody for that unless they're obviously thwarting your attempts to make an arrest. And so why don't we have training that? APD has an opportunity to lead the nation by example and use some role playing, some training, and knowing the law and respecting people's civil rights. And we paid out $63.3 million, I think, in lawsuits between 2010 and 2016. And us taxpayers don't like paying for that. And there should be consequences if you falsely charge somebody. So we could lead the nation and show the nation how we can stop doing that and train officers better and how to know when they can and can't charge people.
Sure. So officers get a lot of legal training. I mean, they should probably talk about the statutes and the legal training that they do get. Is it reality-based? Like, do we have actors pushing buttons in different scenarios? No, not yet. We've been really focused on getting the processes and developments of the settlement agreement to meet that settlement agreement and get that in compliance, right? Maybe that's a recommendation that you could make as a CPC, that some of that be reality-based training. You know, that's probably the biggest block of your academy, right? Is laws and what does not only state laws, federal laws, but city ordinances too. And when we have other officers that come from other jurisdictions, whether it be other states or other cities, that they specifically have to go through those blocks as well. Because we know that.
Conversation started in that, like, let's do some role play. When can I arrest you? You can't arrest somebody for having a bad attitude or for filming you. We need more practical training in those issues, I think.
Yeah, that's a good
So
recommendation.
how do we get the conversation started?
You guys as a CPC create that recommendation. Tell us what you'd like it to look like.
Ron, are you interested? Can you have a conversation, Tony?
Yeah.
You have to create a recommendation,
We'll,
write it out, vote on
we'll work
it.
on the recommendation, okay? Well,
So, I guess my question or comment is kind of what Chief said a few minutes ago. First of all, I want to say that you guys are stretched thin, and you guys do a great job for what you do. I live in an area down here where you guys probably know about the situation in Dixon, Georgia last night, and probably the one a month ago at the Sahara Hotel. Not everybody probably knows about that. How can they step up patrols because of those issues? And I work at the Metro Detention Center. I'm a facility technician over at Jeff. A lot of these guys are walking down the streets, walking down my alleys, walking around the neighborhood. I see them on a daily basis, and I see them right back out. So, I mean, I know that's not really an issue with you guys, it's with the judges and what goes on. But stepping up the patrols because of those violent crimes, and I can understand about the car thefts and the home burglaries, but I mean, you know, a murder, I live right down the street from the Sahara Hotel.
Yeah.
And then last night I was actually sitting on the porch when I heard the gunshots, and the car go through the intersection.
Right.
So, I mean, that's my question.
And I maybe this started to speak a little bit more to this, but the first thing is you guys telling us when those things are happening, right? When you call in 242 cops or 911, report what exactly it is so that we have a tracking mechanism of where the hot spots are located each area. And then the resources are allocated, hopefully, appropriately. You can ask for a close patrol, which I'm sure you guys get requests to do close patrols constantly, but depending on availability, the officers will try to do that. And you guys jump in at any time.
Well, you know, what you guys don't know is maybe those things are happening, but you don't know the end result. So last night, yes, that shooting did happen, but there was 3 people that we ended up catching from that vehicle that we placed in custody. I was on that scene last night, actually, the whole squad was. We come in 3 p.m. to 3 a.m. So pretty much anything you're hearing about, we're on it. So I think we're pretty good at catching the offenders. Maybe we're not good at maybe, you know, and it's not a matter of being good, it's just maybe we're not able to be there when the incident's happening, but we're very good at apprehending, you know, and then investigating it the best that we can. As far as witness patrols, we're we're stretched too thin. We're going call to call to call. When this shooting happened last night, we had 35 calls holding. And every officer, which was probably about 30 to 40 last night, was on a call already. So it's like, I don't see that happening for us. We can't patrol here. We know about that. We've done field briefings there. You know, we go there the first 20 minutes for a shift and make our presence known. But I wish we could do patrol, but I'm just being realistic with you.
No,
We
I
cannot.
It's rough, you know.
And I'm managing, you know, not just my squad, but other squads as well. These officers are trying to get from call to call to call. You know, they try to wrap up the call that they're on so that they can get to another high priority call. So it's really tough. We know the problems. We know that they exist. Well, I'll get to it later when I give my stats, but all we can do is really just cruise by, do a briefing, or maybe do our reports there, but because of that instance, it wouldn't even be safe to do our reports in a parking lot because, you know, we would be focused on our computer screen rather than what's going on around us.
So you're basically saying that we're very underserved as far as the number of police people that we need to have in the city.
Well, I mean, if we had 150 extra officers, we'd be in great shape.
Right.
And it's not for a lack of trying on our department because I work with recruiting on part-time and it's just the quality of applicants and just getting them there to be physically fit to pass those filters. There's a lot.
Different things I'm looking at recruiting wise is, we saw a perfect storm, if you will. In the early kind of 20 years ago, we saw 2 classes of 93 officers. 20 years from now, whomever's in that administration is going to have to figure out how to fill 93 seats in our community, right? And there was kind of a little bit of a lack of push for recruiting that entire time from 20 years ago. So we were combating that. Then the state changed its retirement structure for para, and we saw lots of officers that retired because they were getting financially penalized if they didn't retire at that time. So they would have to wait 7 more years for additional cost of living increases. So both of those things combined really kind of sucked out some of that staffing. So those changes have all been fixed. There's no more going to be waves of huge retirements we hope with now what's been put into place. And we should be able to better prepare. You see the stats, we graduated 93 people last year. That's our goal again this year, is to exceed that, get 100 more butts in the seats, and just continue to grow from there. So I know it's hard, and these poor officers are struggling, but we have a plan, and we're trying to reach that plan. Also, it's hard to be a police officer in this day and age, and it's not an easy job. A busy job, which is good for people that are on it, but not everybody's there. And that's the other reason that we kind of put that tiered career path in, so that we can show people what policing is like, and then hopefully they choose to wear a badge.
I give them a lot of credit for, being in this town, because it's not just right here, it's all, 4 corners of this town.
Yeah.
Like I said, I work out there at the jail, and when they bring them in, you guys bring them in, I see you guys bring them down full. So I know what you guys are going through, so I understand, and thank you guys, I appreciate it, all of you guys.
So now, maybe it's because of the golf business, but I'm kind of like a Bill Pong kind of guy. So I think the short videos, the good news about cops, to me, first page of the Albuquerque Police website. If anybody's interested, they can click and see that video.
That's a good idea.
And then the pie charts, anything that has the build upon the stops with the non-use of force, anything that's visual that has that high percentage, I think should be on the first page. It's just visualization starts, and then they want to see more data.
Yeah.
But visual, it's becoming more popular data visualization, so using data and then showing that on the first page, can engage people. And that could be a recommendation we can make maybe from the CPC. And I forgot about, speaking of tinted windows, reminded me of, keep in mind having the zip codes that the cops, the officers are patrolling for that year or three, maybe stuck on the back of the fender, so it was a connection, you know, where kids can see, hey, that's my zip code, that must be my cop in there, so
That's a good idea.
connections are kind of a visual connection that way. But other than that, I was gonna say this for later, I just wanna, is it Officer Sean? What's your last name? Delaney? I just wanted to say, as we were saying, across America, officers and the information out there can maybe create people not to get into the police force. So I'm sure you all, hopefully, probably already know this, but I just want to, and I think it's a reflection of a lot of people in there. Thanks for just continuing to be involved, because I think you see Albuquerque is a great place, and through all these changes that CASA also implemented and we're implementing, which is great. I love your class. I think is a special class, because I think you're right. You kind of came on right in the middle. Does that make sense? And I just want to thank you personally for just being in that class. Thanks.
Thank you for your support. I just had a few questions pertaining to this monitor report that came out. So I understand the concept of the blue team software for the centralization and use of force and investigative materials, but did you guys get rid of evidence.com for your own body cam footage? So this is in addition to, but only for use of force?
Yep.
Okay. I just have a couple other questions. What do they mean by EC, electronic control weapon placement? Do they literally mean where it's placed on the person, or where you're aiming it, or what does that mean?
Yeah, so the tasers, when they have a light.
You're talking about the location on the belt.
Oh.
It's the electronic weapons where you can monitor ECW placement. I'm just curious as to what that meant as far as the audit procedure.
The settlement agreement requires that it's placed on the weak side.
So you're not saying it's firearm?
That's correct.
Oh, placed.
So during the inspection, that's checked.
Okay. And as far as the numbers that you were reading off of the CIT-related incidents, there was 34 arrested and detained, and that's great. It's very minute compared to the whole proportion. But of those individuals, do you happen to know how many? I mean, obviously they're transported either to downtown and then through prisoner transport to MDC, or the officers go out of service and they take them to MDC. But do you by any chance offhand know what percentage of those 34 are rejected by MDC for various reasons? Because sometimes I know officers take offenders to MDC, and MDC won't admit them. They won't take them because they have like an open wound or something like that. Or they get admitted and they decompensate really quickly and they have to be transported to the hospital, something like
I was
that.
gonna say, if that happens, don't they have to go to the hospital, if MDC won't keep them, or no?
Well, they have medical staff there, so they'll usually keep them.
I think it's important to hear too that MDC isn't just the jail, they get mental health resources inside the jail.
Right.
So it's not like we're just taking that person in crisis to jail and sticking them in a cell. They have mental health help, and sometimes it's almost better than what they might get at a hospital.
Sometimes it's the only way they can get help. So I understand that.
I have to look into the first question, I don't know.
Okay, so do you know, it talks about NRAC and behavioral sciences section. Do you by any chance know who oversees BSS? Is that like a division of the Albuquerque Police Department?
Dr. Rosenbaum?
Yeah, Dr. Rosenbaum.
Okay. Sorry, I just have a few more questions.
We're glad you studied. We're glad someone else is great when you're reading through the
Yes, I
document.
for sure did. So, I didn't hear anyone talk about the project management office, and it's a new thing that's coming within the city. Is that going to be an independent agency with Molina Healthcare, or is that within APD's purview?
I can take this one. So that's a new project that we're starting with Molina Healthcare. Selena had mentioned the Six Sigma projects that we're doing, where we're bringing in experts, efficiency and process experts from UNM, from Presbyterian. We have a whole slate of them rolled out. We meet once a month. And what we're doing is we're looking at ways that we can make a difference in the processes. Like one of the biggest challenges that we have right now is the directive that all use of force investigations have to be completed within 72 hours, and that's a big challenge. So we're working with all of our lieutenants and sergeants that are members of this group in order to figure out how we can make that happen. So the project management office is kind of an offshoot of this larger Six Sigma project. And what that is going to do, we realized, well, we have all of these projects that we're trying to be more efficient, and we want a external source with some experience to make sure that we're able to measure that in a way that shows, yeah, we are making a difference. What's working, what's not, and then they'll act as sort of the historical depository for all of the proposed projects that maybe we didn't get to right now, but are maybe still really good ideas, and help us work through those, all of those projects.
Okay, that's pretty promising. That's pretty innovative too. So I appreciate that.
Sure.
So as far as the recruitment, selection, and promotions, I know that the Peace Officers Union has had some, concerns about this process and the use of force policy, certain aspects of it. Can you speak to what exactly those objections are?
I hate to put words in the union's mouth, but I can tell you generally. So, and if you guys you can speak from your perspectives as well. But that they were concerned that Chief was having a direct influence on promotions, like choosing who does and doesn't directly get promoted. But it doesn't work just as Chief saying you're promoted, you're not promoted. So it's almost an all-encompassing process, and it goes through the promotional board, and then Chief looks at the data behind each person that's on the list. So an officer tests for that position. Sergeants and lieutenants are tested positions. So they automatically place per their testing scores. And that's not just a written test, they do scenario tests through that testing, they do interactive tests, a panel reviews that test, and they grade independently, the panel does, on that promotion. So the union had a concern that maybe there was too much chief influence in that promotional process. I'll leave it up to you. Should a chief be able to, with the data that's provided to him or her, be able to select which officers get promoted?
I don't think at that level we should, but that's just my personal opinion. Maybe command staff or deputy chiefs or something of that effect, but I don't know, I don't think so for line staff. But that's just my personal opinion.
One of the, you can imagine that promotional policy is pretty controversial, right? Everyone's got pretty invested in their views. And I think that the teams, both APOA, City Legal, they've all done extremely well. And I think really the only last sticking point is the length, how far back we're going to look to consider discipline and other factors when it comes to promotion. I think really that's the only thing that's left on the table, as far as I can understand.
That's an important point. So since that first controversy, or the first questions from the union and their first concerns, they brought all the parties to the table, the union, city legal, the command staff, and said, okay, well, what are your concerns? Let's compromise, let's walk to the middle and meet it out. So as Director Slauson said, that's the last part of that step. So it wasn't like Chief heard that complaint and said, I'm not listening to you. It was brought to the middle to be able to work it through.
And the groups are still continuing to talk about it.
Okay. Thank you for that. You talked about the development and support of the CPCs, and there's some data based on the survey that you guys conducted. Is this survey available in its more full format? Because it says, more data will be released soon. And I'm just curious about some of the, for example, there's 54 respondents, but I'm just curious to know, well, which CPC may have carried the bulk of those responses and so on and so forth.
So I have the surveys, and I'll have them out every couple of months, because what was happening last time was the same people were filling them out, so you weren't really getting a true statement. But I can grab them, they're in my car after the meeting, so you can see.
And then I think once all the CPCs have been surveyed, there's no reason we couldn't put that data up on the website. I can actually give you a direct copy of what we've comprised so far. It just hadn't been put on the website, but yeah, it was shared.
And in the same vein, the community perception study, I would love to see that.
Yeah, is that on the website?
That should be. That's through research and polling. It's probably on the main city page.
All right.
But it does have about 5 or 6 pages that are pertinent to APD and the settlement agreement.
And I think, next CPC, I'll bring that in so you can have hard copies of it too. With this presentation was just really long and I didn't want to burden too much. But that's something that I think the CPC should really dive into and look at because it has some good data in it.
We could put it on the website so you guys can see it.
Okay, I appreciate it. I'm glad you all my points of inquiry, so I yield. Thank you.
Did anyone else in here read the agency report this last time? Anybody?
It's only 15 pages long.
Yeah,
So
they condensed it, so I mean.
we wrote it that way because we want people to read it. I know that some of them, in the past have been 100 pages, 300 pages. But this one, especially the narrative, we wrote it because we want more people to be familiar and to read it.
And then it spurs questions because that's what you're here for, is to ask those questions and throw ideas at us.
And you're the author, sir?
I am partial author, yes.
Nice prose.
Well, what's your name? I'm sorry.
My name's Bill Slauson. I'm the executive director for the department, for APD.
Anybody else?
At that point, I think we'll, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. We have a couple more things to finish up on our agenda. One of the things that members of our council do are ride-alongs with officers, and I'm going to ask for a couple of reports on ride-alongs. Frank did a ride-along and has a report prepared, and we'll take just a couple of minutes. One of the things we try to do is ask you, as you've done a ride-along, take notes. You don't identify specific addresses and things like that, but you can talk about an area of the city or a neighborhood or something like that, and the circumstances of the call. And just take notes. You don't identify people that have made the call or anything like that. But that gives us an understanding of what happened on your ride-along. And then at the end of that, produce a written report that helps describe your experience and that sort of thing. And we keep a log of ride-along reports. And it's a good experience for members of the CPCs to go through that experience and see how the officers interact with the people that are involved in the call and sort of. So Frank?
Well, real quick, Siri's asking how many minutes you want for, I just want to make sure we release this up.
Well,
Frank,
we have to absolutely be finished by 5 minutes, so they lock the place out.
So it's 7:42, then we got the crime report?
Yeah.
Okay. Frank, have at it.
Thank you. I did right on last week, 12-hour shift from 3 to 3. Was assigned to Brian Johnson, and he was already working. He was at the courthouse on a DWI case. So, and I would also like to mention, it's kind of in keeping with today's lecture, is Brian and some of the others that were working the 8 o'clock at night, 3 o'clock in the afternoon and 3 o'clock in the morning, several of them had to get up and after very little sleep and go to the use of force training at 8 o'clock. So this shows what kind of dedication we have from our officers. One thing that I noticed with all the officers, no matter what kind of call we were on, were how they were all friendly, calm, and patient. Certainly more patient than I could have been. For public safety, the officers don't normally engage in high-speed high-speed chases, like for a stolen vehicle, like we heard about last week up in Santa Fe, for public safety. Also, they don't normally use lights and sirens unless actually necessary. One waste of officers' time is false security alarms. Apparently that happens the vast majority of the time. Customers, I guess, are given 3 freebies, and after that they're charged $25 for a false call. So this does waste a lot of officers' time. One lady that we went to stated that her baby had pushed the alarm button. But she also said that she had notified the dispatcher that it was a false call, and yet Officer Johnson apparently was dispatched to it later anyway. I'm not quite understanding why. Maybe Officer Doser can tell us. Now, other than some of the routine calls, there was usually 2 or more officers that, for their safety, 2 or more officers that were responding to the calls. One thing that Officer Johnson did for me to help keep me safety was, like, if he went to the door where alarm was, he'd have me stand out of the, what would you call it, corridor of danger, or pyramid of danger?
Fatal funnel.
Hmm?
The fatal funnel.
Okay. I couldn't remember the exact.
We have about 1 more minute, so we still have to do crime stuff.
Okay, well, the most exciting call, if you will, was at the state fairground. An individual had left a stolen truck with stolen license plates in the American Legion parking lot, and then fled across the street and jumped over the fairgrounds concrete block wall. One thing that I'd like to mention here, which would be important for all of us in describing a suspect, is in addition to the clothes and all the normal descriptions, I also gave a description of the shoes, white or light shoes. And that's a good thing to do because, if you did get change and throw out some of his clothes, but they don't usually change their shoes. Oh, 911 calls. They're prioritized. So, there might be a whole list of 911 calls for the officers, but the ones that, of course, have the priority is a crime that's happening, that's in progress, especially a violent crime. Unless there's any questions, I guess my minute's up.
I would recommend that you go online to the CPC website, the city website, and look at our minutes. Last month, the director of the 911 and 242 call cops gave a presentation about the use of 911 and 242 and broke that out. And so we've included some of those comments and points that she made in those minutes. I don't know if they're still there. I put some printed papers over there that talk about the use of 911 and 242 cops. And if you would like to pick up a copy, you can. And if you would like a copy and there's no other,